the nitty-gritty, but just more on the timeline and where, kind of when and where you should be doing this kind of stuff. And then, the locations for them as well. So as far as the agenda for today, we're going to review the provider workflow. So just a quick reminder on all the responsibilities for providers and where those go in. I think sometimes getting the order, just overviewing that is a good idea so that we're all sure which track we're on and which steps need to come first. Also, we'll go over some important steps for doing troubleshooting and for doing all of those steps in the workflow. And then we'll do troubleshooting timing, so the best timing to do the troubleshooting and just a couple finer points on that. And then we'll quickly go over the reports for troubleshooting. We're not going to get too much into them. I'll just show you kind of what they are and what you're looking for. But as far as examples, we'll do more examples in the next training that we'll have. That'll be probably a month from now. We'll do the part 2 of the troubleshooting, and then we'll get into more detailed examples and specifically what you'll be looking for on those reports. But today is just meant to be kind of an overview and getting everything in the right order and just making sure that we're good on the responsibilities.
Are you muted?
So the provider workflow looks about like this. So it begins with, well, it's in a circle, so it could really begin with any one of these, but we'll just start up here with ordering vaccines. Just be sure that you're ordering your vaccines appropriately and getting the right amount of vaccine in your clinic. You don't want to have a whole bunch extra, and you don't want to have not enough for that month as well. And another tip is to make sure that you always receive your orders as soon as you get them into your office. So if you don't receive your order into your inventory, your online inventory, it's not going to show under that reconciliation page, and then you won't be able to track it, and your reports won't be filled out automatically for you. So just make sure that you are receiving your vaccines as soon as you get them in. If you delay with that and you start administering those doses, and then you don't get around to receiving it in the system or telling the system that you have it until later, it can cause some problems, and we'll get more into that later. But just make sure that you're ordering them appropriately and receiving them, and then any extra ones that you want to add into inventory, whether they're transfers or in or out or expired doses or whatever, just make sure that you're accounting for those appropriately too. Also, administering vaccines, that's the next step. So once you do have your physical vaccines, and once you've told the computer that you do have them, then you can start administering them. And once you start administering them, the system's going to track those, who you gave them to, when you gave them, and how many. So those will be tracked for you through the system, whether you come into the IIS and manually enter those by finding the patient and giving them the vaccine, or if you have an interface and that information gets sent over automatically. Either way, as long as the patient and the vaccine are clear, then those should be populating your reports for you. And then monitoring inventory. It's really important, and these are kind of the 2 steps that we'll just be overviewing today, is monitoring, reviewing the reconciliation, counting, double-checking, just making sure that everything looks good in the system, either from a bird's eye view, or if you do find problems, if you get down a little bit deeper and actually want to find out where that dose went, just monitoring, and then troubleshooting and correcting. So if you do find discrepancies, you'll want to correct the inventory. You'll want to make that right on the reconciliation page, and then correct the patient records if need be. So then by the time you get here to submit reports, it's likely that your report should be pretty close, if not right on, because in the meantime, you have the inventory, you've been accounting for it throughout the month, you've been administering it, and then you've been checking to make sure that everything's been coming over accurately and that nothing is getting left out or left behind. So by this point, by the time you get to submitting your monthly reports through the system, those should be pretty well done for you. And just as a reminder, those are the vaccine or doses administered report, and then the reconciliation page, which is your inventory report. So those are the 2 online reports that you'll be submitting every month. And then once you have submitted your reports, then you can go back to ordering vaccines. So any questions on the overall workflow or the placement of any of these steps, or any questions on why they are in this particular order? All right, we'll move on then. So just a tip, before, if anybody has, sometimes whenever there's a staff turnover or there's a change, or sometimes if you just haven't looked at your inventory for a while, or maybe you're just starting with an interface with the system, whatever the reason is, if there's a big change up, it's never a bad idea to go into the system and just clean up your inventory. So before you can consistently track your inventory and have the system kind of auto do everything for you, you need to make sure that the information is right to begin with. Because if it's not right to begin with, it's not going to be right after that either. So the way that you'll clean up is you'll just make sure that you have a count ready. Then you can go in, and sometimes a good indication of whether you need to clean up your inventory is if you go to the reconciliation page and there's a lot of negatives, or there's a lot of expired vaccines or those ready to expire, or there's a lot of lot numbers in there that you no longer have in your refrigerator, things like that. That's a good indication that you probably need to clean up your inventory and just start fresh. So how you'll do that is just get a good physical count, go actually count your vaccines, and then basically make the system match whatever you actually have in your fridge, because whatever you physically have, that's the gold standard. That's what we want everything else to match, because it doesn't matter what the computer says you have. If you only have 5 of this vaccine, then if the computer says you have 10, then that's not true. You need to make the computer match what you actually have in your refrigerator. So the way you do that is you can inactivate lot numbers that you don't have anymore, and you can do that on the reconciliation page, and then you'll reconcile. So if you have used 10 doses, but the system doesn't say that you used 10 doses, or if you just don't have that one anymore, or maybe you transferred some in and you actually have lots that aren't listed on there, then you can add those in as well. So just make sure that that reconciliation page by the end of your cleanup matches exactly with what your count was. And then moving forward, this is kind of a big step. This can take a little while for you to get everything to match in the system. But once you've done that, in the future, all you need to do is just receive your orders moving forward. And that goes back to that workflow a couple slides ago, where it's really important to just come in and tell the system, yes, I got this shipment, because the system can't start tracking it unless you say that you actually have it. Another thing is to be aware of the timeline. So as I mentioned before, the difference between when you get that package of vaccine in your clinic and the time that you actually tell the system that you have it, if any vaccines have been given in between here, then those are going to throw your reports off, because the system doesn't know that you actually have the vaccine until here. So anything that was given before you tell the system you had it, these ones won't be counted and they won't be accounted for. So if you do make the mistake of not receiving it on time, or not receiving it before you give those vaccines, be sure that you know just how many have been given before you received it and account for those, because you're going to be off by that many. So any questions on the timeline or anything up until now? Okay. So these are the tools that I most commonly use for troubleshooting, as far as just making sure that everything's coming across properly. The first one that I would say is the reconciliation page. That's one of the most handy ones. And the things that you're looking for here are, you guys know what's coming in and out of your clinic. You know about how many vaccines you're giving per day. So if you look at the reconciliation page, that should be just a running count of what is in your refrigerator at any given time. If you look at it and something looks off, either a number is stagnant and it's not changing when you know that you've administered those doses today, or if there are some that are expiring, or if one of the numbers starts going into the negative, you know that there's a problem there and you can look into that problem further. But I would say the first place to start is the reconciliation page, because that just gives kind of a bird's eye view of what's going on in your fridge, and you can be alerted of any little problems along the way. So to dig a little bit deeper to find where those problems are, the patient detail report is a popular favorite. That can tell you, if you run it, there are a few different ways to run it. It's actually got probably limitless possibilities, but there is one specific way you can run it just to find errors. You can run it pretty open, or just run it for that week, and you can see everybody that you've given a vaccine to. You can run it by gender. You can run it by the vaccinator. You can run it by a certain VFC status. But usually what I suggest is to run it for those under the age of 19, so everybody up to their 19th birthday. And then if you do have an interface with the system, then you can run for publicly supplied vaccine and say no. And so everybody should have received a publicly supplied vaccine, but if you run it for VFC eligible patients who did not receive a publicly supplied vaccine, then it will give you a list of all of those that might have an error with them. So what you're looking for on this, or you can just run it open. You can just run it for everybody, depending on the size of your clinic. And I would suggest for like a 1-week plan at the most. But what you're looking for is missing information. If there are blank spots under the lot number on this one, then you know that just wasn't put in and it didn't make it into the system, whether you manually entered it and just didn't choose one, or if it was sent over via interface and it didn't populate in there. Also, if there are any historical vaccines, you'll want to look at those and make sure that they weren't actually administered at your clinic and maybe written down wrong as historical. Things like that happen sometimes, so it's just good to double check on those historicals that show up. And also, if there's a wrong lot number or manufacturer written. So that's the patient detail report. Lot usage and recall report. So I'm going to go back up to this one. What it does is it gives a list of all the patients who are given a certain lot number. So you can run it for, just one of your lot numbers that you have, and it will just give you a list of everybody who received that. The actual original intent of this report was for recalls. If there ever was a vaccine recall, then you want to run everybody who has that lot number and get a hold of them. But it's also nice for finding those patients who have received it, for your troubleshooting purposes, like, for example, this one. If you actually started administering that vaccine before you received it and you want to know who these patients are that you gave it to before you actually received it, then you can run it for this date range. So if this was the 1st of the month and you didn't actually receive it till the 5th of the month, you can run it through the 1st through the 5th, and it'll give you the list of those patients that you accidentally gave it to before it was received in the system. So that's just a handy tool for things like that. And also, if you ran out of a vaccine, you know that you ran out on the 20th of this month. I no longer had any flu past the 20th of this month, but we have 5 patients down as receiving, that lot number, on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of this month. Then you can run this lot recall listing and get a list of those patients that have that lot number down when it's impossible that they got that lot number. So then you can do more research then and find out what they actually got. So does that make sense as far as the lot recall listing and when you would use it? And also feel free, so I'm not getting too much feedback here, which is hopefully means that I'm being clear. But if you also want to chat, use the chat box. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen under the little GoToMeeting thing. So if you want to put in some chat too, then I can read those questions as well. There's also viewing the lot log, and that is under Search Add. And that you can see when the vaccine was received. So if you're not sure if it was received or not before you started administering it, you can just go into the lot log under the Search Add screen, and you can see when it was received into the system, any manual adjustments that have been made. So if somebody said, oh, we wasted this one, and they did that on the reconciliation page, or if they said these 5 doses were administered but not linked to a vaccine, then you can see any of those manual adjustments on the lot log as well. And then last, there's a vaccination totals report. Some clinics like to run this. A lot of times they'll do it by vaccinator. So which vaccinator gave which vaccines, and this can be used to catch if there's float staff errors as well. So we'll just run through kind of a view of what each of these look like. This is the reconciliation page. Hopefully you guys are pretty familiar with this. This is that page that you, at the bottom, it has a Submit Monthly Inventory button, and so you'll go through, add in the physical inventory for each one of these, and then submit that at the end of the month. So again, if anything looks off on this page, for example, if the quantity on hand starts saying negative numbers, or if these are expired or they're starting to expire, then you can edit those, or you know that something is wrong. And you can also use this to compare. So if you run that patient detail report and there is a lot number on there, you know, sometimes people will consistently flip-flop numbers, or they'll, you know, put an A instead of a 4 or an 8 instead of a B. It's easy for there to be little typos. So sometimes you can just take that report and compare it with your lot number or with your reconciliation page here. And so this just gives you a quick view of your lot numbers that are active, and it's easy to find, you know, just compare here versus your printout and see if there's a typo. The patient detail report is this one. So like I said, you can run it a zillion different ways, but it can be filtered to fit most of your needs. If you do have lot numbers that maybe they're not, so we'll say here on the reconciliation page, if you know for sure, we'll use this one as an example, this Pediarix. If you know for sure that you've administered 25 of these in the last few days, but this number is staying at 50 and it's not going down, then maybe that's a good time to run the patient detail report. Sometimes you can run it by a certain lot number, or you can just run it open and see if maybe somebody's mistyping that consistently, or you know, just see what's going on and why it's not coming over. And if you run it for your patients, and this is for those that have an interface, and to a limited degree those that manually enter as well, if you run it for those under the age of 19 who did not receive a publicly supplied lot, then that will mean that anything that it displays will have an error in it somewhere, and you just need to find that error. So either it's historical, just double check that and make sure that it actually was given or was a historical vaccine that they brought in and not something that was administered in your clinic. Just double check that. If it is historical, then it's fine. You can just leave it. It's accurate. Or if there's missing information here, you can just see that there's no lot number or manufacturer code listed. So if that's true, then it means that it didn't come out of your inventory and it's not being tracked because there's nothing to track here. So you'll just want to make sure that all of these are filled out. And then if there's a typo in the lot number, so for example, maybe this was supposed to have a -1 on the end of it, and they forgot that. So you can just compare this with your reconciliation page and see pretty quickly where the typo is. And all of this at the next training, we will go more into that at the next training. This is a lot usage and recall report, and so this shows all the patients who received a certain lot. So going back to that timeline, if you forgot to receive your vaccine in time before you started administering doses, then those are not getting taken out of your inventory. However, if the lot number was written down correctly in the patient record, then you can still run it and they'll still be attached to this report. So even if it didn't come out of your inventory, you can still run this report for that lot number, and it will give you a list of everybody who received that lot number. So this can be used, for example, if you went into the negatives on one of the lot numbers on your reconciliation page. If it's in the negatives, then you'll want to find out the day that you actually ran out and run it for all dates past that date just to see who didn't actually receive it. And then the vaccine lot log. So this is if you go to the search ad page. It's right underneath the reconciliation page. So this is where you would go to add in vaccines if you have private or if you transfer something. So the search ad page, and then if you click on any one of the lot numbers listed there, you can click View Lot Log, and it shows you this. And so as you can see here, it just has all of the activity that's happened to this. It doesn't have dose by dose. You would have to run the lot recall listing for that as far as which individual patients have received it. However, it does give you any manual changes and when it was actually received. So with this one, you can see, for example, it was received from the VFC program, and you can see the order number. You can see when it was actually received, you know, when that was actually put in here, and then the date. So sometimes if these don't match, it means that somebody went into the search ad page and backdated it. So that would be the difference between these two dates. And then you can see if somebody went to the reconciliation page and made any manual adjustments, like lost or unaccounted for or transferred. Those are just recorded in here as well. So you can see if your staff has been making edits to that. So this can also be helpful if you're not sure if you, for example, transfer doses to another clinic, or if you do account for dropped or wasted doses. And you know, sometimes you have a lot of staff and you're not sure if they actually got around to doing that or not. You know, you talk to Nurse Sally and you say, did you record that one in the IIS? And they say, yeah, I think I did. Well, you can come here and see if they actually did record that in there. And if it's not there, then you know that you need to actually do it. And then the vaccination totals report. This is the last one. So you can just run this, and it will show you the vaccinators. It lists out all of the vaccinators, the number of vaccines that they've given, and the % of total selected. So sometimes vaccinators like to see individually how many vaccines they've been given. And also if somebody is listed on here that doesn't work there anymore, or you know, maybe one person has given a lot of vaccines and nothing is showing under them, then you might need to adjust your vaccinators in the system so that they're correct. And that can also be indication of a problem as well. And that is all I had for today. Like I said, it's going to be a really quick overview, just a high-level overview of the tools that are available. And then the next meeting that we have, which should be in about a month or so, we'll go over a little more detail in all of these and actually running them in the system and the criteria that you're going to want to use. So I'll pause now for questions if you just want to speak up, or type into the chat and we can answer those. All right. Danette, do you have any closing remarks before we close out?
First, I just want to say thank you for presenting this information to us. And although it is high-level information, it does give everyone, I think, a good idea of what they can do in the system. And for all of the clinics that are attending today, I encourage you to log in, to play around with it. You know, you're not going to hurt anything to go in and play with these reports and see what they can do. If you have any questions about what you're looking at or how things kind of relate or why something looks a certain way, feel free to call either myself or even Rhonda. I believe her, I think she has her information in here as well, or can share it with you. But I'm happy to answer questions or kind of explain why things look a certain way if you have questions. And then I do want to just kind of highlight that we are going to have another Lunch and Learn session, which will be part 2 of this training, where we will go into further detail about running those reports and even do a demo of what that looks like. Rhonda will log in under the test site and actually run through some of those reports and how to pull them up and compare them and that. And so I want to just remind you that that information is now currently sent via the newsletter that's sent every month. And I know there's a lot of information in that newsletter every month, but I highly recommend reading through it. We have many, many trainings offered through that newsletter that you can register for, and that's where the Lunch and Learn session for today was initially sent out, and we didn't have anybody registered until the reminder email yesterday. So I just want to remind you all to read the newsletter. It is a lot of good information, and we hope to see you also at the part 2 for this training next month. And it looks like we might have questions now.
Yeah, so I put in, everybody, in case you didn't notice, I put in my phone number and my email address into the chat. So if you want to take those, I didn't put them on a slide this time, but if you want to copy those, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions.
All right, if there's no questions, then I think we can say goodbye and thanks for joining us for lunch, and we will see you next month.
Have a great day,
everybody.